Texas A&M having another, fairly strong year on the field. Obviously lost quarterback Haynes King to an injury, maybe lost about a game or two more than they would have liked to, but it'll still be a nice year where they'll probably manage to, win eight games, maybe 9 with the bowl. But the recruiting that A&M is doing this year is really sort of a shot across the bow for the rest of the country, and especially one for LSU, which is a direct competitor there in Texas and in Louisiana, and an elite recruiter in its own right. I just wanted to kind of run down what A&M is doing, where their class ranks, and maybe some guys it could close with, but also just the absolute freak athletes they have already in this thing.
Yeah, I mean so sitting at number 5 right now in the 247 Sports Composite, number 3 in the SEC, just kind of shows the teeth of the SEC in terms of recruiting. But last week they go out and they get the number 2 player in the country in Walter Nolan, defensive lineman from Tennessee. Obviously a highly coveted guy, a guy who makes so much sense in that conference. And what it comes down to in that conference, and everybody knows this, is line of scrimmage play. And I think that's where A&M has gotten significantly better since Jimbo Fisher has joined there. Connor Wigman, another guy, we have him ranked number 32 in the top 247, a quarterback. It's kind of the crown jewel of that class, and I know we're going to talk about him earlier, but I mean, you keep going down the list. Bryce Anderson, Dion Bowie, Malik Silla, Le'Veon Moss this morning, P.J. Williams, another guy that they like as an offensive tackle. And then not to mention, they're in it with Evan Stewart, another top 5 ranked guy. And then Harold Perkins as well from Texas. I mean, this is legitimate top-end talent, national championship caliber type of classes that we are so used to seeing from Nick Saban and Kirby Smart year in after year. That's what A&M's doing right now. I don't know if people realize that. The biggest question for A&M is going to be, can they sustain this, especially when LSU gets back in the mix? They go and they take arguably the best back out of Louisiana this morning. Once LSU gets back in the mix, they're going to be a major player in this as well. Maybe Texas figures it out over there, and they're more of a player. But A&M doing what they have to do in terms of taking advantage when the fences are down, LSU going through some adversity, and they're doing a fantastic job. I mean, I can't say enough in terms of what they've done in recruiting this year, in terms of what they have left. I mean, Enai White, I didn't mention him, Shamar Stewart, some of these guys. I mean, if I could, like I said it this morning, if I could handcraft a class around top-end talent, it'd look a lot like what they got going right now.
Defensive line and quarterback, no doubt about it. I know I got to see Walter Nolan down there at the Future 50 event at Bradenton IMG, and just absolute stud. I mean, I did not get to see Albert Haynesworth in high school, obviously, but Coop, the way this guy is built, just the pictures don't do him justice. When you see him at the All-Star event, you're going to be, if you haven't already seen him in person, just he's freaky, man. He reminds me a little bit of like how he's built, at least like a Dexter Lawrence. He's just a guy that big should not be able to move that fast. And if you watch the clips of him at the end of that All-Star event, I mean, they lined him up not at nose, not at 3 tech. They lined him up playing like a 6-7 tech, and he dips the shoulder and beats a left tackle 2 out of 3 times, committed to LSU. A guy who's 3, what are we calling him? 325?
Yeah, 315, 320. Yeah, Will Campbell, committed to LSU out of Monroe. But, that was it. I mean, you look at the game tape and you say, okay. And then you look at the measurements, and then you're checking another box, like in terms of his size, his frame, how wide he is. I mean, I think it was over 350 at the UA Future 50 Combine.
Yeah.
And you go into that kind of scratching your head a little bit and say, okay, that's a little bit too heavy for me. And then you see him off the hoof and you're like, okay, he's carrying that weight well. And like you said, they lined him up everywhere. As a 1 technique, as a 3 technique, as a 5 technique, going up against the best competition in the country. It didn't matter whether it was Will Campbell committed to LSU or Tyler Booker committed to Alabama. He dominated. There was nobody better than him that day, which, that's the fun part, getting to see the elite go up against each other. He dominated that day, and that's a big part of why he is where he is in the rankings. And for A&M to get a guy like that that's so highly coveted by the SEC, by Alabama, by Georgia, just kind of showing where they're going right now.
I mean, and that's the thing, too, with when you dominate in a non-padded camp at 350 pounds with finesse moves and quickness off the edge, like that really makes it pop in a different way, because obviously if you're 350 and you're worth a damn, you're going to have the power game, right? And he can lean on people, but he wasn't bull rushing people. He was taking a half man. He hit him with a rip. It was that was pretty impressive for sure. One thing I've been interested to see with the evolution of Jimbo's offense there at A&M is, can they start hitting explosive pass plays? So far, I think they've been like 99th, 97th, 103rd, and 97th in Bill Connolly's explosive pass rating in Jimbo's 4 years at Texas A&M. But it looks like help could really be on the way with some of the guys they have in this class. I mean, if you think that's more about the quarterback play than about the offensive scheme, what do you think about Connor Wegman and his ability to maybe help that offense to break out vertically down the field more?
Yeah, we really like the player. Like we were talking about this before the show, but he's a really good athlete, and I think a lot of his game is based off of his athleticism, and he's a threat as a runner. So I really like him a lot, and as a passer, he's really good. So I think a big part of his evolution at the next level is going to be schematically how they use him and how Jimbo decides to use them. And I know we talk about it. Is that going to be Jimbo tailoring an offense around his skill set, or is that going to say, hey, these are the things that we like to do within our offense. We need you to match that. So I do think he gives a different element that A&M hasn't really had in terms of what he can do on the ground as a runner. And then he has a really intuitive game where he improvises really well as well. Really active passer outside of the pocket. I think that deep element that we talk about can exist. It's just going to be really a question of how they craft it.
That'll be so huge. If A&M adds that to this defensive line class and the defense they already have there with Mike Elko, that they really will be national championship caliber. I look at my stat screen and everything pretty much lights up in green, which is good, and then I have this one little box and it's just deep red and it's explosive pass rating. I'm like, man, if they could ever find a way to hit explosive pass plays, there's no real difference between like this team in Alabama or a Georgia or an Ohio State on a game-to-game basis. So that'd be absolutely huge for them.
Yeah, you gotta remember too, like Evan Stewart would play a huge part in that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, an extremely dynamic player in terms of what he can do, take the top off the defense. Then the other guy that, I didn't even mention earlier, Chris Marshall. I mean, this guy's only been playing football for 2 years, committed to A&M. We have him now in the top 40, one of the best pass catching receivers, jump ball 50-50 guys in the country. So certainly a lot to be excited about. And when you have guys like that, that just decreases the margin of error for a quarterback like Connor Wegman. So I'm sure Jimbo is excited and thinking the same thing.
One more guy I wanted to ask you about is Malik Silla. Remember like 2 years ago at 24/7 Sports, when we started to dive in on the 2022 kids, they gave me defensive ends, and I was really excited about the defensive end class in the state of Texas because the year before we didn't really have a great DN class in Texas. And I was like, man, you got this kid is he still at Katy, I believe?
Yeah,
I remember when I watched him first, like this guy's got some frame. He can play with some leverage, and yet you also look at him and say, I mean, he might be able to put on some serious weight. That'll be interesting to see how they deploy him in that 3-down system they run there. Do you see him more as like a stand-up hybrid guy, or more as like a dude they try to get to 275, 280 and play hand in the dirt?
Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations about this. He has exceptional length. I don't see him. He's a really good athlete, but in terms of playing in a 2-point and playing off the edge, I don't see that for him. I see him in a 3-point stance, playing in a 3 technique, 285 pounds. I mean, this guy has 37-inch arms, which would put him in the top 10% of all NFL starters at his position. So I think those are, don't quote me on it, but it'd probably be top 3 longest arms in this class. So what that means is he's got a lot of growing to do, a lot of development to do. I see him with his hand in the dirt, but I think they can deploy him a lot of different ways. And the fact that we haven't even talked about him kind of says a lot about what A&M is doing right now.
For sure. Man, A&M is building an absolute monster of a class there. We'll see if they can close it out with an Evan Stewart and a couple other guys down the stretch. But no doubt about it that they are building a national championship foundation there in College Station.